Okay, chapter 5 of the Vanderbeekers of 141st Street. So in chapter 4, what happened? They went up on the roof and we got to see their really fun contraption that they made. That was so cool. So they're still trying to figure out a way to change his mind. They called the roof the REP, roof of epic proportions. Okay, chapter 5. The radiator woke Hyacinth the next day, whistling a joyful good morning. Instead of feeling cheered by it, like she usually did, Hyacinth felt as if sewing needles were poking around her stomach. It was Saturday, the official start to Operation Biederman. Through her window, she could see the last wrinkled leaves gripping the branches of the ancient red maple, refusing to drift down to the ground until absolutely necessary. Hyacinth could tell Lainey was still in a deep sleep without even looking at her. Lainey made a funny whistling sound when she slept. Hyacinth climbed down from her bunk, shoved her feet into her bare slippers, and tugged on her favorite fuzzy sweatshirt, which she had stolen from Oliver. She stepped over a snoozing France and crept out the door, careful to turn the doorknob in that special way to keep it from squeaking. Despite being second to the last in the Vanderbeeker family line, Hyacinth often felt she was the true middle child. Of course, Oliver had earned that right by being born between two sets of sisters, but he had the honor of being the only boy, which held him apart. The twins were exactly the same age, so in Hyacinth's mind, they sort of counted as one. If you didn't include Oliver, because he was a boy, that left Hyacinth taking the true middle spot, fending for herself in a household full of strong-willed, attention-grabbing siblings. To get her fair share of time with her parents, Hyacinth had developed the habit of getting up early. She tiptoed downstairs. Her dad was sitting on the couch, cradling his mug of steaming coffee, a thick book open before him. Paganini was hopping in bizarre patterns around the living room carpet, periodically flinging himself into the air and spinning as if auditioning for a Broadway show. George Washington lay sprawled on his back, lazily swatting the bunny as he zipped past. Hyacinth stepped around the animals and snuggled in next to her dad. He slipped an arm around her, drawing her close. He smelled like coffee and peppermint drops. "Papa, why does the Biederman hate us so much?" Hyacinth asked. Papa kissed the top of Hyacinth's head. "Hate is such a strong word. I definitely don't think he hates you. I think he's unhappy, which has nothing to do with you kids." Hyacinth thought about the Biederman mission they had planned for that morning and was glad they were going to do something so nice for him. Then she felt ashamed that she was too afraid to do the first mission, even though all her siblings wanted her to. "Papa," asked Hyacinth. "Yes." "How can I get more brave?" Hyacinth squeezed her eyes shut and curled in nearer to Papa. She was afraid he would tell her she would never be brave. "Why, Hyacinth, you're one of the bravest people I know," Papa said. "Really?" Hyacinth asked, her eyes popping open. "Really," said Papa. "It takes a super brave person to be as generous as you are, Hyacinth. Not many people are brave enough to be so loving." Hyacinth thought about this while she watched Paganini nibble on a stack of books and George Washington groom his ears. Papa smiled at the animals. "Until one has loved an animal, a part of one's soul remains unawakened." Hyacinth looked up at her father. "What does that mean, Papa?" "It means that animals make our hearts happy in a very special way. A French man named Anatole France said that a long time ago." The sound of the door opening, then another one, marked the end of Papa and Hyacinth's morning alone time. A faucet turned on in the upstairs bathroom, and they heard water whoosh through the pipes within the brownstone walls. A big thunk followed, which was most likely Oliver jumping off the last few ladder rungs of his loft bed. Soft footsteps padded down the upstairs hallway and paused at the top of the stairs. Lainey was awake. She descended one step at a time, the stairs creaking happily. When she got to the bottom, she speed-walked to Papa, climbed into his lap, and nuzzled in close. And there they sat for a precious few minutes, Papa and his 2 youngest children, while the rest of the family awoke and the sounds of the city began its crescendo all around them. 10 minutes later, the Vanderbeeker apartment buzzed, with kids and parents going in and out of bedrooms and bathrooms and up and down stairs. When Isa came downstairs, she saw Oliver, his hair rumpled on one side, sitting slouched on a stool by the kitchen island, staring at an open book. She pulled out a stool across from him and sat down. "Do you really think we can win the Biederman over in 4 days?" she asked as she gathered her hair back and braided it in a long plait. Oliver spoke without looking away from his book. "Sure, and why don't we solve America's budget crisis and save the orcas while we're at it?" Isa paused. "So that's a no?" "Honestly," Oliver said, "I have no idea. I think your idea was brilliant." "Really?" Oliver perked up a bit. "Oh yeah," Isa said. "I have a good feeling about it." "Then you should hear my other idea," said Oliver, closing his book. "I think we should use a combination of Lainey, Hyacinth, and Jessie. First, Jessie can pick the lock to the Biederman's door. Next, Hyacinth can torture him with her sewing needles. And then Lainey can suffocate him with kisses and hugs until he... Let's just hope the first idea works and he realizes how wonderful we are and begs us to stay," Isa interrupted. Oliver grinned. "Too bad you're too nice. I could probably think of a way to get you in on the plan." While Oliver and Isa discussed the Biederman mission, Hyacinth came downstairs with an armload of felt. She settled down on the living room carpet and busied herself cutting red felt circles for her holly berry placemats. Franz looked on with his woeful basset hound eyes, then went to his food bowl and began the slow process of nudging it across the room until it banged into her knees. Hyacinth recognized the gravity of the situation immediately. "Oh, my poor Franz, you must be starving." Franz looked at Hyacinth and forgave her at once. Hyacinth filled his bowl with precisely 1 scoop of dry dog food. The veterinarian had warned her against giving Franz more than that for fear he would get too heavy. Oliver, who had been beside her at the appointment, muttered, "Too late," under his breath, just loud enough for Hyacinth to hear. It was a particular gift of Oliver's that he could say things that adults couldn't hear, but his sisters could. Hyacinth was feeding Franz when a disheveled Jessie came downstairs with her signature bedhead, followed by Lainey wearing a glittery crown. "We're off," Jessie announced to Isa, Oliver, and Hyacinth as she wrangled Lainey into her puffy purple jacket and sparkly winter boots. "Make sure to buy extra cheese croissants," Oliver said. "Good idea," Jessie said as she grabbed a ragged scarf and wrapped it around her neck, all the better to persuade the Biederman with. "The extra cheese croissants were for me," Oliver clarified, "but I guess you can get some for the Biederman too." Jessie and Isa shared an eye roll. Then Jessie took Lainey's hand and led her outside, where they promptly bumped into Mr. Smiley, the superintendent at the big apartment building on their block, and his daughter, Angie, who was friends with Oliver. "Hello, Lainey." "Hello, Jessie," Mr. Smiley said. "Tell Oliver he owes me a basketball game," Angie said. Oliver and Angie were constantly challenging each other to one-on-one basketball games, and it had to be said that Angie was so good the boys' basketball team begged her to play with them. Jessie and Lainey waved goodbye. They passed by the brownstone with the turrets, then the brownstone covered with ivy, then the brownstone where garlands of pine were draped along all the windows, and a huge wreath with a wavy burgundy bow decorated the heavy wooden door. They turned the corner onto the boulevard, where the quiet of their street gave way to city buses with their screeching brakes and shop owners unlocking and rolling up the metal grates they had pulled down over their stores the night before. The garbage truck squealed to a stop down the street, and Mark, one of their neighborhood sanitation men, jumped off the back and tossed the contents of an overflowing trash bin into the hopper of the garbage truck. "You're strong," Lainey called. "I'm going to be strong one day, too." Lainey pumped her arms to show her biceps. Mark laughed and said, "Hey, I got a good joke for you, Laney. What's red and white and red and white and red and white?" Laney tilted her head, considering. "A candy cane?" "That's one answer, but I'm thinking of something else," Mark said, grabbing hold of the end of the garbage truck once again. The truck began to move. "Tell me!" yelled Laney at the retreating truck. He bellowed the answer. "Santa Claus rolling down a hill!" Laney giggled and waved as Mark saluted her from the back of the garbage truck. Down the avenue they went. They passed by Harlem Coffee with their long line of bleary-eyed customers, A to Z Deli, which was just opening up, then the library, still closed for another few hours. Once they passed the library, the sisters made a right at 137th Street. They smelled the delicious, buttery, sweetbread smells from Castleman's Bakery before they saw the storefront. Castleman's Bakery, home of the legendary cheese croissants, was right across from the entrance to City College. It had sat in that same location for decades and had a loyal following of people who would cross boroughs and state lines to buy bread and pastries there. The Vanderbeeker kids truly believed the Biederman would take one bite of the buttery but not greasy, flaky but not crumbly pastry and be won over at once. Mr. Castleman was the renowned neighborhood baker, and his wife managed the front of the store. They had a son, Benny, an eighth grader at the twins' middle school and a close friend of Isis. He worked as a cashier in the bakery on the weekends and some days after school. At his suggestion, his parents had recently purchased an electronic touchscreen register that had all the prices programmed in, along with a credit card machine, allowing customers to sign their name with their finger. Benny, however, was the only one who knew how to operate the register. Mrs. Castleman preferred to use the antique cash register that made a brisk ka-ching sound whenever the drawer opened. "Hey, hey, what's up, Vanderbeekers?" Benny called from behind the two registers with a wide grin. He wore a football jersey and blue jeans under his work apron. Jessie smiled at him, and Laney ducked under the counter and wrapped her arms around his waist. "Hello, Princess Laney," Benny said as Laney adjusted the crown on her head. "I have a joke for you," Laney said. "Tell me." "Okay, what is Santa Claus rolling down a hill?" "Wait, that's not it." "I forget." Laney's eyebrows were furrowed with confusion. "What's red and white and..." Jessie prompted. "Oh, yeah. What's red and white and red and white and red and white?" Benny tapped his chin with his index finger. That's a tough one. Laney was gleeful. Do you give up? Should I tell you? Tell me. I can't think of anything. Santa Claus rolling down a hill." Benny chuckled. "Oh, man, that's a good joke. I'm going to remember that one." Benny picked Laney up and sat her on the counter next to the register, then plucked a jam cookie from a wide-mouthed glass jar and handed it to her. Then he reached in again and retrieved one for Jessie, presenting it to her with a gallant bow. "Thanks, Benny," Jessie said, taking a bite from the crumbly cookie. She had known him for so long that she forgot to call him Benjamin, the name he decided he wanted to be called the day he turned 10. Mrs. Castleman peered through round tortoiseshell spectacles over the glass case containing the breads and pastries, her gaze just barely skimming the top. "The usual, yes?" she asked. Jessie nodded. "Also, I need 3 of your best breakfast goodies for our upstairs neighbor." "How are Miss Josie and Mr. Jeet doing?" asked Mrs. Castleman. "Oh, they're doing fine, but the pastries aren't for them. This time it's for our upstairs neighbor, Mr. Biederman." Mrs. Castleman raised an eyebrow in surprise. "Mr. Biederman? He lives on the 3rd floor. We're trying to persuade him to like us." Jessie rummaged through her bag for her wallet. "Mr. Biederman," Mrs. Castleman repeated softly while she leaned down to pluck pastries from the display case. Something in the way Mrs. Castleman said his name made Jessie stop. She bent down to peer through the glass case, but she could only see Mrs. Castleman's hand reaching out to retrieve the pastries. "Do you know him, Mrs. Castleman?" A pause. Jessie was about to ask yet again, louder, when Benny interrupted. "So, Jessie, did you hear about the 8th grade dance?" he asked casually, leaning his elbow on the counter. Laney still sat next to the register, picking through the coins in the little cup that said, "Take a penny, leave a penny." Jessie glanced at Mrs. Castleman once more before turning back to Benny. "No, what about it?" Jessie said to Benny as she dug through her tote. "Battered science book, a couple of pieces of candy in tired wrappers, scuffed calculator. Oh, there was her wallet." "Well," Benny continued, "do you think your sister would want to go?" Jessie lifted her eyes to his. "What sister?" Benny stuck his hand deep into his pocket of his jeans. "Isa, your twin sister?" "Isa, go to an 8th grade dance party?" "Benny, she's a 7th grader. She can't go to an 8th grade dance. She can go with an 8th grader, which I am, an 8th grader, and I would ask her nicely, of course. Do you think she would say yes?" Benny began to shift from foot to foot. Lainey interrupted. "I like to dance," she informed him while handing him 2 pennies from the take-a-penny cup. Benny took the pennies from her and dropped them back into the cup. Meanwhile, Jessie's mind spun like the centrifuge she used in science class last month. Benny wanted to take her sister to a dance without her. They had never gone to a school dance without each other. They had never gone to a dance with a date, ever. That would surely violate the rule of twins. Somewhere in that unwritten contract, there must be a clause that clearly stated that neither was to attend a dance without the others, especially with a date. "I am positive she wouldn't want to go with you, Benny. I'm sorry," Jessie said. "Not that you aren't great. It's just that I definitely think no." Benny's face fell. "Why not?" Jessie started to feel a little bad for him. "It's nothing against you. I just can't imagine her saying yes." She opened her wallet and pulled out some money. "I like to dance," Lainey repeated as she took another penny from the cup and tried to scrub it clean with the hem of her jacket. Benny didn't respond to either sister. He carefully rang up Jessie's order on the cash register, took her money, then handed her the change. "Thanks, Benny," Jessie said, grabbing the bags of croissants and the goodies for Mr. Biederman. Benny lifted Lainey down from the counter, and she ducked back under and took Jessie's hand. "See you around," said Jessie with a brief wave. "Bye, Mrs. Castleman." The 2 sisters left the bakery while Benny and his mother watched them disappear from view. Mrs. Castleman wisely stepped into the back room where her husband was twisting and kneading bread, leaving her son alone with his thoughts. Don, don, don. The next chapter is called 6.